He lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew each other but still respected their own space. The streets were lined with trees that gave shade in the summer and turned golden in the fall. Birds chirped in the mornings, and the air always smelled faintly of fresh grass and coffee. From the outside, he looked like any other man in the area. He kept his house tidy, mowed the lawn every weekend, and greeted neighbors with a polite nod or wave. People would often see him walking his dog in the evenings, a loyal companion with soft fur and bright eyes. The dog seemed almost like an extension of himself, following his every step, sensing moods, and providing comfort in ways that words never could. Life had been simple, routine, and peaceful. He worked during the day in a regular office, handling tasks that required focus and precision. His colleagues respected him, though they knew little about his personal life. He was private by nature, preferring to keep his past buried and his daily life predictable. There was a rhythm to his days, almost comforting in its familiarity. Coffee in the morning, a brisk walk with the dog, a commute to work, a few conversations with colleagues, then back home for dinner and quiet evenings. He liked it that way. Chaos and conflict were things he had left behind, or so he thought. The dog was his constant companion and source of joy. He had found the dog years ago when it was just a puppy, abandoned near a park. It had been thin, scared, and wary of people, but something about its eyes had caught him. There was a spark, a connection that was immediate and unexplainable. He had taken it home, cared for it, trained it, and in return the dog offered unwavering loyalty and love. Every morning the dog waited at the foot of the bed, tail wagging, ready for the day. Every evening it would sit patiently by the door when he came back from work. It was more than a pet. It was family. Despite the calm exterior, he carried a past that no one in the neighborhood could imagine. He had once been part of something intense, something dangerous, something that demanded skills and discipline beyond what ordinary life required. There had been missions, operations in faraway lands, and situations where every decision was a matter of life and death. He had seen things that most people couldn't even comprehend, faced dangers that would paralyze ordinary men, and survived because of training, instincts, and sheer determination. But all of that was behind him now. He wanted normalcy. He wanted quiet mornings and evenings filled with laughter and the simple happiness that the dog brought. Even though he tried to live a normal life, there were moments when the past surfaced in small ways. The way he moved, always alert to surroundings. The way his eyes scanned a room when he entered, noticing details others overlooked. The way he could remain calm in situations that made others anxious or fearful. People might have called it focus or discipline, but it was far more than that. It was experience hardened by years of demanding and dangerous work. Yet he never flaunted it. No one in the neighborhood knew about it, and he intended to keep it that way. The dog, however, seemed to understand him in ways no human could. It sensed moods, comforted him without being asked, and was always there, silently observing the world by his side. Their bond was unspoken but profound. He would often talk to the dog, sharing thoughts and worries, knowing that it listened without judgment. It was during these quiet moments, sitting on the porch as the sun set, that he felt truly at peace. No missions, no danger, no judgment, just him, his dog, and the world around them. Neighbors liked him, though they never got too close. They respected his privacy and admired his calm demeanor. He would occasionally help with small favors like fixing a fence or picking up groceries for someone who couldn't manage it. But mostly he stayed to himself, content with the quiet rhythm of his life. Children waved as they walked by, and he would nod and smile. Elderly neighbors appreciated his polite and respectful attitude. The neighborhood was safe, quiet, and ordinary. Everything was as it should be, or so he thought. Evenings were his favorite. He would prepare a simple dinner, often talking to the dog while cooking, and then settle in to watch the world go by from his living room window. The streetlights would come on one by one, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. Cars would pass occasionally, neighbors would come and go, and the dog would curl up beside him, eyes half closed, breathing softly. It was in these moments that he felt a sense of serenity that had been rare in his earlier life. He cherished these small, peaceful moments, perhaps more than he would ever admit. Yet despite the calm, there were signs that not everything was as safe as it seemed. He had noticed an increase in police activity in the neighborhood over the past few weeks. Patrol cars seemed to appear more often, sometimes driving slowly past houses, other times stopping near intersections. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but he noticed it. He didn't fear them, not really, but he paid attention. He knew that even in a quiet neighborhood, mistakes could happen, and mistakes, he had learned, could be deadly. One afternoon, he took the dog for a walk in the park. The sun was warm, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Children played in the distance, and families enjoyed picnics. The dog bounded ahead, sniffing everything in sight, tail wagging happily. He followed, keeping a careful eye on both the dog and the surroundings. He liked these walks because they gave him time to think, to breathe, to exist without past memories intruding. The dog would run back occasionally, nudge his hand, or look up at him with trusting eyes. It was a simple pleasure, but one he valued deeply. During the walk, he noticed a police car slowly driving along the edge of the park. He didn't react, simply watched them as they passed. There was nothing to worry about, yet something about their presence felt heavy. He had learned to read subtle cues, to sense tension before it escalated. He continued walking, letting the dog explore while he observed the world around him. The neighborhood, the park, the streets, all were calm, but he remained vigilant. It was a habit that had never left him. That night, after returning home, he sat on the porch with the dog, watching the sky darken. Stars appeared one by one, and the world felt quiet and safe. He ran his hand through the dog's fur, feeling the warmth and softness, and allowed himself to relax. For now, the world was peaceful. He told himself that this was the life he had chosen, the life he wanted, and that he would do whatever it took to protect it. The dog's presence made everything seem bearable, even joyful. He didn't realize that this calm would soon be shattered. Small, ordinary events sometimes have consequences that ripple far beyond their beginnings, and sometimes those consequences arrive without warning, upending the lives of ordinary people who simply want to live quietly. The bond between a man and his dog, the rhythms of daily life, and the peace he had worked so hard to achieve, were about to be tested in ways he had never imagined. For now, though, he continued his routine. Mornings of coffee and walks, days of quiet work, and evenings spent in the company of his loyal companion. Neighbors waved, children played, and the neighborhood seemed as safe and ordinary as ever. He allowed himself to hope that this peace would last. He didn't know that life sometimes had a way of delivering challenges that no amount of skill, discipline, or experience could fully predict. And when those challenges arrived, they often came without warning, striking at the very heart of what one loved most. As he sat there that night, the dog resting its head on his lap, he felt a sense of gratitude for the simple pleasures of life. He knew he had survived far more dangerous situations than quiet suburban life could ever offer. And yet, in this moment, he realized that there were dangers even in peaceful places. Dangers that required patience, vigilance, and sometimes a strength that had long been hidden. But that strength, honed over years of extraordinary experiences, remained with him. It was always there, beneath the calm exterior, ready if needed. The man and his dog remained on the porch, watching the world fade into night. The stars twinkled faintly above, and the gentle rustling of the trees created a soothing rhythm. For now, everything was calm. For now, life was simple and ordinary, filled with the quiet joys of companionship and routine. And for now, he allowed himself to simply be, a man, a dog, and a world that seemed just for a moment to be at peace. The bond between them, unspoken and profound, was a reminder that even in the quietest corners of life there is love, loyalty, and an unshakable sense of connection that no one, no matter how formidable, could ever take away. It was a late afternoon when the first signs of trouble began to appear. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood. He had just returned from work, carrying the familiar weight of the day's tasks, and the dog followed closely, sensing the change in energy around them. At first, there was nothing unusual. Cars drove by, neighbors went about their routines, and the world seemed unchanged. But a feeling of unease settled in his chest. Something was off. The sound of sirens in the distance was the first concrete sign. Police cars began to appear, slowly making their way down his street. They moved with a presence that felt deliberate, almost searching. He stopped walking, crouched down beside the dog, and looked carefully through the window. A small knot of tension began to form. His instincts, honed through years of training in life-or-death situations, told him to pay attention. This was no ordinary police visit. The knocking on the door came next. It was firm, authoritative, demanding attention. He opened the door slowly, the dog by his side, tail low, sensing the seriousness of the moment. Outside stood several officers, their expressions neutral but their posture rigid. One of them spoke, explaining that they had received a complaint about suspicious activity in the area. It was vague, almost generic, but it carried an underlying tension. The way they looked at him, the way they positioned themselves around the doorway, suggested they expected resistance. He responded calmly, explaining that he was simply returning home from work, that nothing unusual had happened, and that he had done nothing to warrant concern. He tried to maintain a tone that was polite but firm, hoping to de-escalate the situation. But the officer seemed unsettled. Small movements, gestures, and looks passed between them. His heart rate remained steady, his body controlled, yet he could feel the situation teetering on the edge of danger. The dog, sensing the tension, began to growl softly. It was a warning, not an act of aggression, a signal that something was wrong. One of the officers noticed and, instead of trying to calm the dog, reached for a weapon. The world seemed to slow down. Time stretched, each moment carrying the weight of potential disaster. He froze, mind calculating possibilities, anticipating outcomes, but refusing to panic. The dog barked once, a sharp sound that cut through the air, and in that instant an officer fired. The dog fell. The sound echoed, unnatural in the quiet neighborhood. Grief struck him instantly, deeper and sharper than anything he had ever felt. The dog had been more than a companion. It was a part of him, a constant presence that had shared every quiet victory and every moment of sorrow. He fell to his knees beside it, hands trembling, heart pounding. The officers shouted commands, moving quickly, but he barely noticed them. The world had narrowed to a single point: his dog, lifeless, and the unbearable sense of loss. Neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. They saw the scene unfold, horror and confusion written across their faces. Some called the police for clarification. Others just stood, unsure what to do. The sight of a man kneeling beside a fallen dog, grief etched into every movement, made the situation real in a way that words could not. Their ordinary, peaceful street had been shattered by a single irreversible act. He felt an anger rising, hot and consuming, but he restrained it. Every instinct told him to lash out, to act in a way that would make the officers regret their mistake. But he knew that giving in to that anger could make the situation worse, potentially even deadly. He had faced life and death scenarios before, and he understood the value of control. The officers, for all their authority, did not know the truth about him. They could not comprehend the depth of his skill or the precision of his training. He could act, but he chose not to, at least for now. The initial shock gave way to a focused clarity. He began to document everything, mentally noting the officers' positions, the sequence of events, and the reactions of everyone present. Every detail mattered. Every movement could be used later to ensure accountability. He spoke calmly to the officers, asking questions, requesting names and badge numbers, and making sure that every word he said was measured, deliberate, and precise. He wanted justice, but he understood that justice required patience and strategy, not uncontrolled emotion. In the hours that followed, the neighborhood became a blur of activity. News spread quickly, neighbors talking to each other, police taking statements, and the man remaining steadfast, composed despite the grief coursing through him. People approached him, offering condolences, support, and sometimes anger directed at the authorities. He accepted their words silently, grateful for the empathy but focused on his own course of action. The loss of the dog was personal, intimate, and yet it had drawn the attention of the entire community. It was a cruel and unexpected twist of fate. As night fell, he sat in his living room, staring at the empty space where the dog used to sleep. Memories of every shared moment filled his mind. The first day they met, the walks through the park, the quiet evenings together. Tears streamed down his face unrestrained as he allowed himself to feel the pain fully. It was a grief that was raw and real, unlike anything he had ever experienced. Even his past, filled with danger and conflict, had not prepared him for this. The bond between a human and a dog was something profound, unshakable and irreplaceable. Yet amid the grief, a plan began to form. His mind, trained to think several steps ahead, began to consider how to respond, how to ensure that what had happened would not be forgotten or ignored. He was determined not to let this act go unanswered, but he also understood the need for careful, calculated action. Impulsiveness could undo everything. He had survived because of strategy, patience, and precision, and he would apply the same principles now. The next day, he began gathering evidence. Cameras from the street, statements from neighbors, anything that could help establish the truth of what had occurred. He moved quietly and deliberately, careful not to escalate the situation further. Every step was measured, every action intentional. His grief remained, but it was accompanied by a determination that was steady, unwavering. The community continued to react, some with anger at the police, others with shock, and he navigated each interaction with the same calm precision that had defined his entire approach to life. Late at night, he reflected on the events. He thought about the dog, the life they had shared, and the sudden, violent way it had ended. He thought about the officers, their misunderstanding and their actions, and he realized that accountability was essential. But he also understood that force or aggression could not be the answer. The principles that had guided him through dangerous missions, patience, planning, and self-control, would guide him now. In the following days, small developments occurred. Police statements were taken, media attention began to surface, and whispers of the incident traveled through the neighborhood. He remained a calm figure amid the growing storm, measured and deliberate in every interaction. He made it clear that he sought answers, not retaliation, but the undercurrent of tension never fully dissipated. The world had shifted in a way that could not be undone, and he was determined to navigate it with intelligence and strategy. Every night, he sat alone, remembering the dog, thinking of the quiet walks and the comforting presence. The grief remained, but it was joined by a quiet resolve. He was no stranger to adversity, no stranger to loss, and no stranger to the challenges that life could present. Yet the loss of a companion, a loyal friend, had opened a wound that was deeper than any battlefield scar. It was personal, intimate, and it demanded attention. He began to consider the officers more carefully. He analyzed their actions, their possible motivations, and the potential consequences of each move. He thought about the lessons of his past, the importance of control, and the value of measured response. There would be a reckoning, not in violence, but in the form of truth and accountability. His skills, his experience, and his strategic mind would guide the process. He would ensure that what had happened could not be ignored or dismissed. Neighbors continued to offer support, and some confided in him about their own frustrations and fears. He listened, offering words of reassurance, never revealing the depth of his own past. He had learned long ago the importance of discretion, of keeping certain truths hidden until the right moment. For now, he allowed himself to grieve, to plan, and to remain vigilant. The world had changed, and he was determined to navigate that change with precision. Days turned into a week, and the neighborhood slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, though the shadow of the incident lingered. He continued his daily routines, walks in the park, quiet evenings, and moments of reflection with the dog's absence weighing heavily on him. The loss was profound, but it had also ignited a resolve that was steady and unwavering. He would act, but not recklessly. He would seek justice, but not through rash decisions. He knew that the path forward required patience. Every detail mattered. Every action could influence the outcome. And though grief remained a constant companion, he channeled it into focus, into clarity, and into the calm determination that had always defined him. The dog's memory would guide him, a reminder of loyalty, love, and the quiet strength that comes from bonds that are unbreakable. Evenings remained the hardest, sitting in the quiet of his home. Memories of the dog filled the space, yet he did not allow despair to take over. He thought about the lessons of his past, the discipline instilled through years of extraordinary experiences, and the necessity of strategy and patience. These principles now guided him in a different kind of challenge, one that required restraint, intelligence, and careful planning. By the end of the second week, he had gathered significant information, documented events meticulously, and begun to form a clear picture of the incident. He had spoken with neighbors, collected statements, and observed the ongoing behavior of the authorities. Every detail was cataloged, every movement recorded in his mind. He was preparing for a response that would ensure accountability, a response that would honor the memory of the dog and the bond they had shared. And through it all, the grief never left him, nor did the sense of loss. But it had evolved into something else as well: determination, focus, and an unwavering commitment to act with precision. The dog had been more than a companion. It had been a reminder of what mattered most, a touchstone for loyalty and a symbol of quiet, unwavering love. Its absence was a wound but also a catalyst for clarity. He understood that the path forward was delicate. Actions needed to be measured, words carefully chosen, and every step considered. The world had shifted, and he was navigating a landscape that required both emotional resilience and strategic thinking. He would not allow the incident to be forgotten, nor would he allow it to define him. Instead, he channeled grief into purpose, sorrow into strategy, and loss into a quiet, unwavering resolve. The dog's memory would guide him, the neighborhood would watch, and he would act with patience, intelligence, and the calm strength that had always defined him. He sat in the quiet of his home, memories of the dog still vivid in his mind. The grief was sharp, but beneath it lay a calm focus, one that had always defined him. He allowed himself a moment to breathe and think, letting the sorrow flow without losing control. It was in that quiet space that his past, long buried beneath years of civilian life, began to resurface, not as a memory to be feared, but as a tool to be used. Years ago, he had been trained in ways most people could never imagine. Delta Force had required a level of discipline, focus, and skill that shaped every part of him. He had been pushed to the limits, learning to survive in hostile environments, to act under extreme pressure, and to make decisions when the stakes were nothing less than life or death. Every movement, every reaction had been honed until instinct and thought were indistinguishable. Missions had taken him across continents, into situations where failure meant consequences too grave to describe. He had witnessed danger, betrayal, and the harsh realities of life in the most extreme circumstances, but all of that had been behind him now. He had chosen peace, anonymity, and the quiet rhythms of civilian life. Until now. He remembered the first day of training when instructors demanded perfection and the slightest mistake was punished. The drills were grueling, the expectations relentless, and the stakes always high. Each day was designed to break and rebuild, to test physical limits and mental endurance. It was exhausting, terrifying, and transformative. Through it all, he had emerged stronger, sharper, and unshakable. Those lessons stayed with him, ingrained in every movement, thought, and choice. They were a part of him, even if no one in his peaceful life could ever guess it. In his home now, he reviewed what had happened with the police. The shooting of the dog had been reckless, a misunderstanding with devastating consequences. He had chosen to remain calm, to document, and to plan, but the memory of the dog, its loyalty and love, ignited a fire within him. It reminded him of what he had fought for in the past, the importance of protecting those who could not defend themselves. The past was not just a series of memories. It was a map, a guide to action, a reminder of what he was capable of when necessary. He thought about the officers who had arrived that day. They had no idea who they were dealing with, how precise and controlled he could be, or how much he had experienced. They saw an ordinary man, a quiet civilian, when in reality he was a trained operative, a professional with skills that far exceeded ordinary understanding. But he did not reveal this immediately. He had learned the value of patience, the necessity of timing, and the importance of strategy. Reacting impulsively would have been a mistake. Instead, he allowed the situation to unfold, gathering information, analyzing behaviors, and preparing for the right moment to act. As the days passed, he began to revisit the lessons of his past in practical ways. He practiced mental exercises, recalling tactical movements, situational awareness, and rapid problem-solving strategies. He moved through his home with awareness, observing everything as he once would have on missions, noting details that others would overlook. Every room, every object, every shadow became part of a mental map, a rehearsal of readiness. It was not paranoia. It was preparation. The past had taught him that being ready was not a choice, but a necessity. He also thought about the dog in a deeper way. It had been more than a companion. It had been a partner, a source of unconditional trust and loyalty. Losing it had left a void, but it also reminded him of the value of connection and protection. In the field, he had often relied on partners and trusted allies. Now the dog had been that ally, and its loss reinforced the importance of acting with precision and care. The lessons of loyalty, observation, and responsibility were not just abstract ideas. They were guiding principles for action. Late at night, he reviewed everything he had documented from the incident. Witness statements, Street camera footage and his own observations formed a detailed picture. He analyzed the sequence of events, officer behaviors, and possible motivations. He knew the importance of understanding the full scope before taking any steps. Patience, strategy, and attention to detail had saved lives in the past, and they would serve him now. Every small detail mattered, and he left nothing to chance. As he reflected, he remembered specific missions from his time in Delta Force, operations in foreign countries, situations where he had been outnumbered and outgunned, but had emerged alive because of preparation, calmness, and quick thinking. He recalled the weight of responsibility, the pressure to protect lives, and the necessity of using knowledge and skill to achieve objectives. Those memories were not just nostalgia. They were a framework for understanding how to handle the present challenge. They reminded him of his capabilities and the disciplined approach that had always served him. He also thought about mistakes, both his own and those of others. In the field, mistakes could be fatal. Every action had consequences, and understanding them was essential. The officers who had shot his dog had acted without understanding, without preparation, and without awareness of the consequences. That recklessness had caused real harm. He recognized that, and he knew the importance of responding in a way that would ensure accountability without unnecessary escalation. The past had taught him that measured action was always more powerful than impulsive reaction. Over the following days, he began to integrate the past with the present. He moved through his daily routines with a heightened awareness, observing neighbors, police behavior, and environmental cues. He continued to interact with the community, maintaining a calm and approachable demeanor while silently gathering information and assessing situations. Every conversation, every glance, every small action was considered, cataloged, and analyzed. He had learned that details mattered, and now they would guide his response. He also began to prepare mentally for possible confrontations. Not because he sought conflict, but because he understood that awareness and readiness were critical. He practiced calming techniques, visualization exercises, and problem-solving drills. Each exercise was rooted in lessons from his past: discipline, observation, and controlled action. These practices kept him grounded, focused, and ready, ensuring that grief did not cloud judgment or strategy. The dog's memory was present in every step, a reminder of the stakes and the importance of precision. Neighbors continued to notice him, though they saw nothing unusual. He maintained polite interactions, offered support when appropriate, and continued his daily routines. From the outside, he remained an ordinary man, living an ordinary life. But beneath that exterior, a mind trained for extraordinary situations was at work, observing, analyzing, and planning. The contrast between the calm surface and the strategic depth beneath it was a hallmark of his life, one that had kept him alive in the past and would serve him well in the present. He also reflected on the emotional aspects of the situation. The loss of the dog had reopened a door to grief, vulnerability, and compassion. He allowed himself to feel fully, acknowledging the pain without letting it dominate his actions. The past had taught him to recognize emotions, to understand their power, and to channel them constructively. Grief became a tool, focus became a response, and the memory of the dog became a compass for action. Every movement, every decision was guided by this combination of emotional awareness and strategic thinking. In quiet moments, he visualized scenarios and outcomes. How would conversations unfold? How would accountability be achieved? What steps would ensure that truth was recognized and respected? Each scenario was examined with attention to detail, weighing potential consequences and considering alternatives. The lessons of the past, the importance of patience, observation, and disciplined action, were central to every consideration. He had learned that preparation was not about controlling others, but about controlling oneself and ensuring the best possible outcome. He also reached out discreetly to neighbors who had witnessed the incident, gently encouraging them to share their observations. He listened carefully, recording details and asking questions in a calm and measured way. The community, still shaken by what had happened, responded cautiously but honestly. He noted everything, understanding that these small pieces of information could be critical in the larger picture. Patience and careful listening were just as important as action and skill. Through all of this, he maintained his personal routines. Walks in the park, simple meals, and quiet evenings continued, but now with heightened awareness. The memory of the dog, The presence of the neighborhood and the lessons of his past guided every step. He moved with intention, observed with care, and thought with clarity. The calm exterior was deliberate, a reflection of discipline and strategy, while beneath it lay a mind preparing for the challenges ahead. As the third week passed, he felt a sense of readiness growing. Grief had transformed into determination, sadness into focus, and loss into clarity. The dog's memory was no longer only a source of sorrow. It was a guide, a reminder of loyalty, love, and the importance of careful action. Every step he took was deliberate, every thought considered, and every interaction measured. The past and present merged, creating a framework for the response that he knew was coming. He also considered the broader context. Life was unpredictable, even in quiet neighborhoods. People acted without understanding, situations escalated without warning, and consequences could be devastating. His experience had taught him to anticipate, adapt, and act decisively when necessary. That same experience now informed his approach to this incident, ensuring that he would respond with precision, patience, and intelligence. He would seek justice, honor memory, and maintain control, all while navigating the delicate balance of civilian life. Night after night, he sat quietly, reflecting on the lessons of the past and the reality of the present. He allowed grief to remain, but he did not let it dictate action. He practiced awareness, honed focus, and maintained clarity. Every memory of the dog, every detail of the incident, and every lesson from his past came together to form a foundation for the next steps. He understood that this was not about anger or revenge. It was about justice, responsibility, and ensuring that truth prevailed. By the end of the month, he had developed a deep understanding of the incident, the officers involved, and the potential paths forward. The past had shaped him. The dog had inspired him, and the present required him to act with intelligence, patience, and precision. He was ready, not for chaos, not for violence, but for a careful, deliberate course of action that would ensure accountability, honor memory, and maintain control. The lessons of Delta Force, the bond with his dog, and the discipline of civilian life merged into a steady, unwavering resolve, preparing him for what was to come. Days turned into weeks, but he remained focused, calm, and deliberate. Each morning began with a walk, the dog's absence still heavy on his heart. He allowed himself moments of grief, but never let it overwhelm him. Instead, he channeled the pain into careful observation and strategy. Every action he had taken since the incident had been calculated, and now he was preparing for the next steps, understanding that patience was as important as precision. He started by reviewing the information he had gathered meticulously. Witness accounts, footage from nearby cameras, and records of police presence all formed pieces of a larger puzzle. Every detail mattered, and he cataloged them carefully. He created mental timelines, noting the sequence of events, how the officers had acted, and what had led to the tragic shooting. His past training made him excel at this kind of methodical planning. It was familiar territory, though applied now to a situation far different from combat operations. He also thought about the officers themselves. They had acted hastily without understanding the consequences. Their actions were careless, and he knew that accountability was necessary. But he was not looking for confrontation in the way the world might imagine. He had learned the value of measured response, the importance of intelligence, and the strength of remaining calm under pressure. Acting impulsively could endanger more than it could resolve. It could undo everything he had worked for. He knew this better than anyone. Instead, he took a step back, observing and waiting. He noted patrol patterns, studied the officers' behavior, and listened to the neighborhood's conversations. Every interaction was data. Every movement was observed. His analytical mind, sharpened over years of high-stakes experience, transformed grief into focus. He knew that when the right moment came, he would act with precision, using information and strategy to achieve a measured outcome. This was not revenge. It was justice, tempered with patience and control. At home, he reconstructed the incident in his mind, replaying every action as if analyzing a mission. He imagined alternate scenarios, how each action could lead to different results. This mental exercise was a way of preparing himself, understanding every possible outcome, and ensuring that he would be ready for whatever came next. Even though he was no longer in combat, the principles remained the same: anticipate, plan, execute with precision. He reached out discreetly to neighbors who had been present, asking gentle questions about what they had seen. Some were hesitant, still shocked by the events, but he spoke with empathy and patience, putting them at ease. Their accounts added depth to his understanding, giving him clarity on how the officers had acted and what the public perception might be. He understood the importance of community awareness, the power of truth, and the necessity of framing events accurately. Small details mattered as much as major actions. While he gathered evidence and information, he also focused on controlling his emotions. He knew that anger could cloud judgment, even in someone trained as he was. Instead, he used the memory of the dog to maintain clarity. Its loyalty, love, and trust became a guiding principle, reminding him of the importance of measured action. He did not want impulsive actions to tarnish memory or principle. He wanted every step to reflect respect, justice, and careful thought. He also prepared for potential interactions with law enforcement. While he had no intention of provoking conflict, he knew that misunderstandings could escalate. He practiced calm responses, clear communication, and subtle observation. Every question, every statement, every movement would be deliberate. In his past, he had faced far greater dangers, and he drew upon those experiences to ensure that he would remain in control. The principle of readiness, drilled into him over years of demanding service, guided his approach. The neighborhood itself became a backdrop for his preparation. Quiet streets, familiar faces, and ordinary routines contrasted sharply with the intensity of the planning and thought taking place in his mind. People saw him as a calm, ordinary man going about daily life, while beneath the surface a trained operative analyzed every possibility, considered every angle, and prepared to ensure accountability. This dual existence, ordinary and extraordinary, had always been a part of him. Now it served a purpose greater than self-preservation. He spent hours reviewing footage from security cameras, noting the timing, movements, and positions of everyone involved. Each frame was analyzed, cataloged, and mentally noted. He identified inconsistencies, subtle gestures, and unobserved details that could be important. This painstaking attention to detail was second nature to him. In his past, overlooking something could have meant death or mission failure. Now it could mean the difference between truth being recognized and injustice being ignored. In his home, he also focused on maintaining his physical readiness. Though the situation did not call for physical confrontation, he engaged in exercise routines to maintain strength, agility, and endurance. Discipline had always been a part of his life, and it was a way to remain grounded and focused. Every push-up, every stretch, and every controlled movement reminded him of the principles that had kept him alive in dangerous circumstances. Strength and readiness were not about aggression. They were about confidence, clarity, and control. His mental preparation continued alongside physical discipline. He visualized conversations with authorities, anticipating their reactions, preparing calm, reasoned responses, and considering the best path to truth. Every scenario was examined, every angle considered, every outcome predicted. He relied on training that had once been for life-or-death missions, now applied to ensuring that an innocent and loyal life would not be dismissed without accountability. The dog's memory gave him focus, and the clarity of his mind guided his strategy. As the days passed, he began to reach out to others in the community, quietly gathering perspectives. He spoke to those who had witnessed the incident, those affected by the event, and those who could provide insight. He listened, recorded, and analyzed, maintaining empathy while retaining strategic awareness. The dog's memory reminded him that loyalty, trust, and truth mattered, and he acted to preserve those values. Every conversation was an opportunity to strengthen understanding and gather accurate information. He also reflected on the officer's actions, understanding that mistakes had consequences, even when unintentional. His past experiences had taught him to assess behavior without immediately reacting, to understand motivation, and to act decisively when necessary. Patience was a tool, observation a weapon, and strategy the guide. He did not seek confrontation, but he prepared for accountability, ensuring that truth and principle would prevail. At night, he reviewed the incident once more, step by step. He thought about how each